Hello and welcome to the space of Conscious CoCreators. I'm Uma, joined today by Shani and Amanda, our beautiful guest of the day. Amanda will bring us to the world of integration of psychedelic journeys. She is weaving consciousness with what is magical and different dimensions. So we will dive into how to recognize what's important and what to focus on in before and after ceremonies and different kind of medicinal journeys. So welcome.
Oh, thank you. It's really nice to be here with you both.
Welcome. Appreciate having you here. And yeah, I'd love to know a little bit more about your backstory and the interest in this world, because as you mentioned, it's a new space of people are now accepting plant medicine as a recognized form of therapy, and you seem to be like at the forefront of this, bringing more awareness to plant medicine as a way of integrating it into your life. So where did this interest come from in your life, and how did that start for you?
Yeah, thank you for that. Indeed, it's this whole realm of psychedelic wellness, psychedelic therapy. It's becoming quite, it's on everyone's minds these days. And as an integration advocate and educator, I really feel that it's important to also bring that awareness to what could happen and what needs to happen after people go through these altered states journeys. For me personally, how this started was really through a personal experience. And I was early on, my early 20s, late teens, suffering from depression and anxiety. For a long time, I was really suffering and unable to cope. And at the time, living in the US, what my family and what I thought was the right way was to take pharmaceutical drugs, SSRIs, benzodiazepines, anti-anxiety pills. And that really supported the symptoms, but didn't actually go after the root cause of why I was feeling the way I was. I suffered a loss and I wasn't able to grieve and to cope from it. And so my mental health was really suffering. And I was trying all kinds of things, but at the end of the day, I was working with these pharmaceutical drugs, and that wasn't really putting a Band-Aid over the problem. Fast forward a few years, I was living in New York, and I came across a group of people that were doing things a little bit differently. They were connecting with meditation, with yoga, with therapeutic movement and dance, and they were going and spending weekends in nature and just connecting with the forest. And that showed me another way of looking at myself as an integrated being. And so when I was offered to do a plant medicine experience, I said, okay, I'm going to try this because I feel that might be what I really need right now. I've tried all these other ways and it wasn't working for me. And so that plant medicine journey really opened the doors. It completely opened my way of seeing the world and actually taking that autonomy back to myself to be able to work through the mental issues that I was suffering from. And so by no means did that plant medicine experience cure me or make all my problems go away. It wasn't like overnight I was ready to go. But it started me on a path of discovering my inner self and discovering how I can actually help myself from a deep place of actually looking at those root causes of why I was suffering the way I was, and not just taking an antidepressant just to treat some of those symptoms. And so that began a very long journey. In many ways, my whole life has been one long integration of that very first journey that I had, because there has been so much that has happened in my life, and I've managed to be able to weave in this realm of altered states of consciousness professionally, but it wasn't always like this. I was navigating worlds. I in many ways had a double life. I was working in tech for many years, and I still really enjoy working in the startup space. But on the side, I was also navigating my holistic well-being. I was working with these altered states and also with dance, with meditation. And over the years, I decided to actually start bridging these worlds. And this is where it led me to going back to university, to studying neuroscience. I really wanted to understand what was actually happening in my brain, truthfully, when I was working with these altered states. So I did the neuroscience studying the effects, the integrative effects of psilocybin together with psychotherapy for people with depression. And shortly after that, I joined a company that was investing in the psychedelic space. And that's when I got really involved in the business side and the investment side of this industry. And so I've touched, there's much more we can go into, but I've really touched a lot of different worlds within that space, though it did stem from very much a personal journey.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I feel so much resonance with that story, with my own and hearing other people's. And I feel like the key part of what you're sharing and what you're helping people with is this process of integration. And this was a concept that before I was into this holistic world, I didn't understand. And maybe I'd had experiences with medicines in the past, but the concept of integration didn't exist for me. I didn't know what that meant or like how to integrate an experience. So I'm curious to know for you, as you said this, you're now in the process of integrating that first experience. What do you feel like integration means for you, and how is it that you define this process of integration?
Yeah, truthfully, and the way you mentioned how that concept wasn't really brought to your awareness at some point. For many people, it's still not really an understood term, or we say it and we talk about it, but we don't actually know what it means in practice.
Right.
What I've come to see is integration, both from sort of a neuroscientific perspective and also just from an embodied practical perspective, is integration is really about this translation. It's a synthesis and a translation of experience and insight, and how we apply it to our day-to-day life in a meaningful way. So we have these moments where we have that peak journey, that peak experience within any kind of an altered state. I always see it as like being at the top of a mountain. We have a bird's eye view. We see everything. All of a sudden, things make sense. We can see past, the horizon is far away. We have this overarching perspective. The overview effect can give us a lot of strength and a lot of courage to do something. We've climbed the mountain, we've gone through a journey, we've hit the top, and we see in front of us. And it can be very awe-inspiring. We can feel this mystical connection, this oneness with all things. It can be very beautiful and transpersonal. And that's wonderful. I see integration, though, is that journey back home down the mountain. We need to return home to our life, to ourselves, to our extraordinary, ordinary state. Because our ordinary lives are extraordinary, of course. And that implies that integration is actually really a process. It's not just a moment that we do, something that we check off 3 days after an altered state, psychedelic journey. Okay, I've integrated now. I've done my journaling. I've done my meditation. I've shared in my sharing circle. I'm going to go home now, and everything's going to be wonderful. Integration is a life unfolding, and it takes time. It takes patience. There's no one right way to integrate. It's not a linear process. But it is, however, a returning to, a coming back to self, to bringing all those pieces back together. That's how I see it. Yeah.
Kind of coming back to down the mountain. I love the way you put that. I could see that experience as the bird's eye view, and you have this like wider perspective for a short amount of time, but then actually bringing it back home and integrating it and grounding it into something, it was, for me, an experience that I didn't have in the past. So as I learned more about integration, I think you brought up an interesting point there where some people feel like, okay, they just have to tick off the checklist of what they think integration is, and then they feel like it will all be fixed. And maybe people might approach it from the same perspective as like taking a pill in the in the past, where it's like, okay, I've done the thing that you've told me would help me overcome the issue, and then maybe taking the pill or taking the plant medicine ceremony should solve the trying to treat the symptoms. But how do you recommend people go about diving into like the root cause issues that are there, that are actually the cause for them to go into the ceremonies in the first place?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think we're still figuring this out. Plant medicines are obviously not legal in most parts of the world, and if they are, only some of them, and they're regulated, and depending on where you are and which substance and all those things. So right now, especially in the United States, at least from what I saw when I was working with this investment company, we're bringing these experiences and these substances in a medicalized perspective, because that's what we know how to do. We see somebody having a mental illness or chronic pain or any kind of a substance addiction, tobacco addiction, alcohol addiction. Okay, there's a disorder or a diagnosis, and these substances are going to be a replacement or another type of way of understanding that. So we've kind of gone through many different phases with these psychedelics, and one of those iterations is that medicalization of treatment of illness, rather than actually seeing these as potentially supportive tools for wellness and well-being, right? Reversing a little bit of the mindset around these experiences. So looking at your question around how can this be seen as something people even approach in the first place? What's actually necessary for them to even say, okay, this could be a possible therapeutic treatment? People come to these experiences for many different reasons, and more often than not, they're not coming to see a medical doctor or a psychiatrist to have a ketamine infusion, for example, ketamine-assisted therapy in a legal psychiatric facility. At least in Portugal, where we are, ketamine is legal for specific cases, right, when administered by a physician. Clinical trials are obviously underway for psilocybin and MDMA, in the United States at least, for other types of diagnoses. For many of us, we're approaching this actually in the underground, right? We're coming to ceremonies, as we like to call them, rituals, practices. We hear it from friends,
Right.
or where a shaman or a spiritual leader is coming into town from an unknown location, and they come, and we've rented a retreat space, and all of a sudden there's these plant medicine journeys happening. That's where most of us are approaching this experience. Not necessarily because they have a very specific, I'm suffering from depression and I'm going to go and do this one ceremony. So I think where it's interesting, this space has almost two different camps, right? One is this highly medicalized treatment, solution, therapeutic integration. Their integration is psychotherapy more often than not, or some kind of therapeutic support that's talking therapy, if there's any integration at all, which I've seen oftentimes there may not be. And then for the rest of us, it's this, there's something wrong with me, I'm lacking some kind of sense of purpose, or I want to go deeper with myself and I'm just going to explore. And then the integration gets a little bit more tricky, because what are we actually intending on? What is our intention in the first place? Why are we actually approaching this experience? Is it a deep curiosity and just opening up the psyche to something more mystical? Is it something very deeply personal that might be about our family traumas or something we're really suffering from? Or maybe it is, I want to look at my addictions or my depression, my bouts of depression, or whatever it might be, or an eating disorder. So we all come to it from different ways. Therefore, that preparation and integration is very, very different depending on those scenarios. And that's something I really try and advocate for when I teach integration, when I coach people. There is the reason for even entering this space of an altered state really determines how we're going to approach it thereafter. And it really also allows for us to move away from that medicalization of just, this is a treatment. This is something that is going to fix something about you. Therefore, it makes the integration much more holistic, longer process. It becomes the medicine journey, is the integration, right? That's where the real work comes after that ceremony ends, is where you're confronted with life.
Right.
And yeah.
I feel that's so powerful to see it that way. And you mentioned that there's some people who maybe the way that they approach it is through these not so clinically approved ways, and maybe more through the shamans, and you don't know who would be providing the services or whatever, and it's not like the medically approved or whatever. So I feel for the people who are having to go down these paths. And now the other thing that you mentioned, which was interesting, was the fact that if you're kind of you're not taking the time to like really integrate the experience, and you want to maybe go from one experience to another, and that can kind of lead you down this rabbit hole of maybe chasing something instead of trying to like actually do the real work, which is the integration, which is what you do. So.
Yeah, another great point, and I see this so much in my circles, the healing circle, the spiritual circles of providers and facilitators of all forms of altered states, whether they be plant medicine journeys, or maybe they're providing breath work, or any kind of energy work. These holistic modalities. Probably many of the facilitators that are part of your group, right? There's people who are in service to some form of a transpersonal dimension there that's really incorporating something much more than just what's happening on this physical plane. So with that comes this interesting situation where the more we start to be more curious and start seeking out these experiences, the more we use those experiences as the method in which we actually wish to uncover more and more and more about ourselves. There's a fine line there, and you bring this up. We start to use those experiences as the answer instead of taking the space between. And the space between is that integration. It's that process of not being in any form of an altered state, but being with the self. Which is the hardest thing sometimes to do, is to be with oneself in reality, in this reality, right? And not to go and escape. And I see oftentimes sort of a premature spiritual awakening happening with a lot of individuals who do a lot of ceremonies, and they come out of it, seeking more and more of that, but they're not actually sitting with the stuff that's coming up. Because things come up and they take time to come up. I look at nature as sort of a teacher for integration. It's a big part of my work. And when we think of the natural world and the cycles of life, nothing happens overnight. This is an inherently human phenomena we're in this society where we press a button and something works. Where in nature does anything happen within a second, right? Things need to uncover and unfold. We need to give time for the process to actually happen. And so this sort of spiritual bypass, as I like to call it, that you mention, is important part of this integration conversation, to make sure we're not unconsciously or consciously engaging in this sort of bypassing of the self for true awakening and transformation.
I'm curious what you said about the dimensions, and how many dimensions are there and what does it mean to be connected?
What does it mean to be connected?
To which dimension do we connect to? And
Yeah, well, we can have like a very long philosophical conversation of different realms and dimensions. I will say that something I teach with integration is actually there's 4 specific dimensions that I look at, and I try and see somebody's experience, the lenses in which they experience the world and how they integrate. It's the physical, mental, emotional, and transpersonal or spiritual dimension. And so these are the 4 that I normally work with. They're obviously very connected to the self and to our relationship to ourselves within those realms. And then they can obviously be amplified to how we relate with others and to the natural world, which for me is the ultimate way of connecting. How are we actually connected is to realize that we are not separate from the environment that we live in. We are not separate from, I am not separate from you, you are me. I am that tree is me. We are all of this. And how we can experience that connection is through, obviously, our physical body as a very important vessel that we often, I think, maybe put to the side when we're integrating. When we're reaching psychedelic states in particular, we're very focused on these mind-based journeys. We're going out of our minds. We're having hallucinations. These experiences are really activating that realm. And the physical body can often be sort of secondary, when in fact it's something that we inhabit as humans, right? We have a duty to bring the physical realm back to that experience. And then, of course, the emotional body is important for us, and the cognitive dimension. And depending on somebody's worldviews, that spiritual element can be very important for somebody's journey with altered states.
Yes, and then I wonder, how is it that the science explains that psychedelic journeys, they make us recognize this connection? Because I had a very similar experience in my life, and I only realized that I'm one with nature during one of my first journeys. And since then, this is something that I cannot unsee, unlearn, or stop feeling. It just became a part of extended awareness. However, I'm wondering if there is an answer to how does it work that these journeys open our awareness into these connections.
Yeah. So there's no one simple answer to this. I wish there was a clear way for me to explain, like, let's say, the neuroscience of how we can connect, how we see ourselves in deep connection and oneness with the natural world, for example, because that's something that I feel is such an important part of these journeys. And it's a huge contributing factor to how we can take care of this planet, is by seeing that we are not separate from her, right? From a more practical side of things, the way I learned it, in terms of the neuroscience of being in a psychedelic altered state induced by substances, namely the classic psychedelics, which you would consider psilocybin, DMT, which is the substance found in ayahuasca, and some others. They are the classic, they're termed classic in research because they are serotonin agonists. They act on specific 5-HT2A receptors on the brain. And what we see with many of these substances, such as these classic psychedelics and others, obviously MDMA as well, we've seen that in research, and ketamine, is this ability for them to enhance our neuroplastic state and our neuroplastic window. So neuroplasticity is this idea that the brain is constantly making new connections in neurons, neurogenesis, synaptogenesis, the formation of new synapses between the different connections in that way. And it also increases functional connectivity within brain regions. There's this incredible study that was done many years ago looking at psilocybin's effects on the brain versus the placebo, not psilocybin. And you can just see, I wish I can show you a photo. You can see it was rendered in sort of in a visual way, so we can best understand. It's not actually the scans of the brain, but you see this heightened amount of connections between brain regions when in a psychedelic state. So this idea that this window is being created for us to create these new neurons to form is that we're open and we're malleable and flexible and adaptable. Something that
So I'm wondering, do you feel like we could reach those states without plant medicine? Like tap into these higher states of consciousness?
With meditation.
Naturally.
Yeah, there's studies showing people, like very experienced meditators, for example, they put them through fMRI and they show obviously these different brain regions being activated as a result of being in these transcendental altered states of consciousness. Specifically with something like meditation and psychedelic substances, there are brain regions such as the default mode network, which is responsible for the self, the I, the ego. It's the seat, we call it the seat of the ego. It's known for self-referential thought, introspection. It can be hyperactive in people who have depression, for example, because there's constant rumination, right? They're thinking. And what these substances have shown is that they actually reduce activity in that region while increasing activity between that region and other brain regions. So by reducing activity there, it means we're more flexible and open. We're not constantly relating our ego self.
Right.
So that's where we come with ego dissolution, right? These
people have ego deaths and experience that through. Interesting. Yeah, I did some research on the default mode network when I was doing some breathwork training, and they showed that you can have similar reductions through like long period of breathwork. So that's why people feel like they have these psychedelic experiences, because your sense of self dissolves as well.
Exactly.
And it's this part of our brain that relates ourselves to everything, and it's interesting how our brain functions in such a way, and there are these connectors that are firing off at every moment. And when we go from those states back into what we call a regular self, it may be difficult to then tap back into that to integrate it. So I feel like when it comes to the integration process, for a lot of people, it is a very like mental process of trying to remember and trying to go back. So that's why some people might fall down the loop of trying to repeat the experiences, because the integration feels almost like trying to catch sand or catch water in your hand, and it's disappearing.
Yeah, and that's also why, I mean, you bring up a great point about breathwork, for example. I fundamentally believe that we can reach these altered states experiences without substances, and that we have it all within us to be able to achieve this true transformation and transcendence that we're looking for. It's really not about the substance. It's never been about the substance.
Now we have DMT within our brains as well.
Especially that if we don't have the process initiated in a deeper level, the substances might not even bring any depth of the journey. It's many times whenever we are already ready to receive a download, then there is intuition that invites us for a journey that sparks into something that's already been craved or unconsciously called upon. And I really agree with what you say, because a lot of people with whom I work within the breathwork modality that I facilitate combine it the closest to an ayahuasca journey.
Yeah.
And if we are willing to lean into these practices, then our subconscious mind already knows what has to come across. And I wonder what kind of modality do you work with during the integration? How does it look to go through this integrative process with you?
Yeah, integration, as I've said before, can look very differently for different people. And sometimes modalities that at a certain dosage or level, very high level, would be considered an altered state. For example, breath work is a great example, or a meditation, can be used in itself as an integration tool at a lower dosage or a lower extreme state. I firmly believe in working with the body in order to support integration. And that can look like as simple as a very conscious movement activity, a movement exercise, or it can become more vigorous, working in an ecstatic dance or 5 rhythms activities. Breath work is a way to tap into what's happening, being very conscious about the breath and how it affects the body state. Deep belly breathing, for example, even up to circular breathwork techniques. I wouldn't say a holotropic breathwork wouldn't be an integration, because that in itself is that peak experience that we're looking for. Meditation practices, visualizations. For those who want to be in their more cognitive realm, I find writing, journaling, that kind of writing reflection to be really useful for some people. And my most favorite practice or modality is really getting outside and just connecting with nature, with your environment. And that could be, it doesn't have to be going very far away, right? If you live near a park or a body of water, or if you don't, and you just connect with the water that's running under your in the faucet, right? Like just actually connecting with the elements that exist around us, that are part of us. So specifically if we're outside, grounding activities, forest walks, spending time in the ocean mindfully. These are ways to connect again with the self. Yeah.
Okay. So in the way you work with people, particularly, it's is it a kind of conversation-based process, and then you give people homework?
Yeah.
Or how does it work?
Yeah, as I work through the lens as a coach, right? So I'm not a therapist. For some, that is very useful for them, and for others, not having that kind of a relationship is actually, it's best to have more of a coaching relationship, because I'm there to help people be accountable for their work. And so we have a conversation, we touch on a couple of different themes, and then based on that, I offer a whole range of homework and activities. And I always tell people, like, our sessions together, they're useful, of course. Though the real integration is, of course, what happens in between. What happens when you're back in life, you're with your kids or your partner, you go back to work, and stuff comes because we exist in this world, right? And how we react to it and what we do with that information. And then we can come back and talk about it, and we can find new ways of incorporating practices that can sustain their inner process.
Okay. I'm wondering, what are some of common insights that you've seen from people you've worked with, because they go through such a transformative experience in this journey, and then it's a process of integrating it. Do they have these I don't know, epiphanies or light bulb moments of when they are going through the integration process, or is it a little bit more subtle in the journey?
In the integration process, rather than the experience itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, some what I hear sometimes from my clients is how they didn't really understand what it actually means to be integrating until they're doing it. I didn't get it, but now I get it, kind of thing. So the actual practical understanding is coming through in the process versus knowing how important it is for them before. Versus, there's almost this, which is why integration can be so challenging to explain to people who are not already in it. Right? Because it's sort of a conceptual, it's like trying to explain to someone what it's like to be in an ayahuasca ceremony journey. How do you actually explain that without, I mean, you can try.
Right.
And then they're in it and they're like, oh, wow, okay, I see. So a big part of it is also feeling into what that means. And it's very subtle. Most of the people I speak with and support, the changes are small and subtle, and they happen over time. It's this sort of consistency and compounding effects of these micro moments that they're changing, these micro behavior shifts. So it might just be the way that they relate to their partner or the way that they respond to the partner in a specific scenario. And that somehow that clicks for them, that's exactly what was happening, what they were processing in their journey, that they're now actually changing. It's not this big shift, life shift. I think a lot of people right after a big experience, they want to make a lot of change yesterday. They're like, okay, this is it. Like, I know I'm going to break up with this person. I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to cross the continent and I'm going to move. And they want to do it all at the same time, right? Because they have this need to change something. It's been so profound for them. And I always like to say, please wait, a month at least before you make any kind of a big decision like this. Because if it's still real for you in 1 month, we can talk about it. So another realization is that subtlety. These changes are sometimes only you will notice. And that's why it's so beautiful and so difficult to quantify and so difficult to really kind of explain to people, right? Because for everyone, it might be a very small shift, subtle. Yeah.
So what's the way to start working with plant medicine when people are struggling with depression or other personality challenges and mental health struggles?
Yeah, whenever I'm asked, for people who are maybe new to this world and who are, as you say, struggling and they don't even know where to start, or it's such an unknown universe. I'm somebody who's quite conservative. I'm not the person who is out here to preach how wonderful psychedelics are and everyone should be taking them. I absolutely believe that they are not for everyone and that they are not the magic solution for people's processes. The more I've been in this world and I see how people are working through the substances, the more I'm convinced of that. It's not for everyone. And what I like to ask people, and who, firstly, I as a coach, I'm not necessarily the one that is seeing those individuals with very severe cases of mental disorders, right? That would be more in the realm of a therapist or a clinician. Just those who are curious to similar to me many, many years ago, who just want to try something else. I like to ask and inquire about how comfortable they are already with just being with themselves in their own space, in silence. Let's try the altered state of silence, right? The altered state of nothing, of doing nothing, of sitting with the person's emotions, feelings, with their own experience, meditation. Have they meditated before for a significant amount of time? Not just 5 minutes a day. How comfortable are people with letting go of control, with surrendering, with the unknown, That
Big
is
topics.
big
Yes.
topic.
I love
right?
the way you said that, the altered state of silence, because I feel that for many people, when they think about altered states, they don't look at themselves and realize there's so many states you can change within yourself without taking something. So even just shifting your mindset is also an altered state, and you can change the way your body feels just from different mindset shifts, or being in silence, or maybe even taking this phone or addiction away from you, which can completely change your state of consciousness as well. And there's so many little things you can do in your life to shift your consciousness.
Exactly. It's exactly these practices of being with the self that are absolutely more important than any kind of a psychedelic substance journey.
So you mentioned
it's
this.
a preparation also.
Yeah, I'm curious about, because you mentioned it's, you don't feel like it's for everyone, but do you feel like there are certain people who maybe it would be beneficial for, and who are those people who maybe could see some benefit through going through this process? At what stage? You said that they've got to be comfortable with themselves. Like, what kind of stage in their life should they be at where maybe a journey would be beneficial for them to go through and then integrate properly?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's those individuals who are already at a state of comfort with their own process, whether they have a deeper meditation practice or a breathwork practice or a self-inquiry practice, whatever that might be. They are already comfortable navigating the unknown. They are already really experiencing in other ways this concept of letting go, of surrendering, of trust, right? And then they're already preparing themselves for an experience like this, and they have to be ready for it and have that intention. So the quality of someone's intention and preparation directly determines an experience outcome, and also the integration of that experience. And so, of course, an intention doesn't have to be, oh, I want to heal from a trauma. It can be, my intention is to just go deeper and just, I'm curious. I'm curious about what else is out there that I necessarily cannot see right now. That's still an intention, but the intention, therefore, is also implying that there's a responsibility that people are taking for their own process. For me, that's one of the biggest factors. If you're ready for a psychedelic journey, are you ready to take responsibility for yourself, ultimately? That is not the most sexy, glamorous thing to say. So many people just want to be in that state. And then that's it. That's where the bypass comes, right? Because they leave and then they just go home and they go do their own thing. Maybe they continue their dieta, their change in their diet or their lifestyle for a couple of days, right? They go inward, they reflect, and then, okay, that's it. But it implies a real commitment to your process. While also, of course, allowing the time, because we don't know how long that integration might take, and being kind to yourself for whatever might happen afterwards. So there's a lot of factors, I think, before someone would to just go, and it's not a decision you make overnight.
Yeah, I fully agree with that, including, I think even advising towards taking a deeper breathwork session is a great preparation, because this is already something that we release control over our conscious and allow the unconscious to surface, and it's shorter, so we can come out of it at any given time. So both preparation and integration. And I do believe that integration nowadays is so skipped, because we don't have time for nothing, and we just jump from one experience to another, and we don't even have time to integrate the day before another day comes, not to mention a few months of integration. So I wonder, what kind of transformation does this prolonged integration support?
Yeah, well, it can support any kind of prolonged integration is really a prolonged way of being in your life. it's a state of being, right? It's a philosophy of looking at the world as constantly being part of it and being an intentional part of it and being conscious of how you react to things and how, therefore, it shapes your own reality. So if you are wishing to have a transformative process because you are, for example, want to make a change in your lifestyle and what you eat and how you live and have more structured routines and just feel more healthy, let's say, whatever healthy might mean for you, prolonged integration is necessary because it takes time for you to actually create those habits that actually last and to have the discipline to maintain that, right? So integration of something like that is actually just life happening and making sure that it's the follow through is there.
So I wonder if you have an idea for space holders and facilitators of ceremonies, how they can encourage this kind of processes after they offer an event, for example.
Yeah. Well, a big part of this integration is actually just a level of awareness and education of what that is and providing participants with the tools to seek that out for themselves in a way that makes sense for the providers and the facilitators. So I don't necessarily believe that those facilitators need to be also part of that person's integration. Space holding is a practice and an expertise that requires a very different kind of energy and education and training and practice. So somebody who's holding space for a mushroom journey, legal mushroom journey in the Netherlands, for example, truffles, and they're hosting retreats every month in their center, they don't have the tools, the resources, the time, or the experience maybe to be part of that individual in that group retreat setting over 6 months to a year, right? So the facilitator can create a way of helping that person transition into the hands of another person, whether it be an integration coach or a therapist or a group dynamic, or just providing tools over an extended period of time so that they can feel that they're being supported.
Right. Before we connected, I had no idea that there were people offering integration as a service. And for me, when I've experienced something, it's always, as you mentioned, facilitators who maybe provide an hour of integration in a circle or something like this. And if you did need integration, then it would be in the form of maybe a therapist, maybe a coach, and you can ask them some questions. But as you are kind of focused and specialized in this, and I feel that there are so many people who are out there needing what you're offering. And how are you finding it to really share what you're doing and bring the light of integration? Because it's, as Conscious CoCreators, we're creating a space for facilitators to connect with retreats and facilitators to connect with other facilitators. And what I see here is you have a gift that you want to share and a gift that you're bringing to the world. And it's needed for so many people when they are maybe a little bit lost after a ceremony and maybe they're seeking this and they probably don't even know that there's somebody out there like you. So it's like, how do we kind of bring more of what you're doing to the consciousness of the facilitator so that they can say like, hey, if you guys need integration, reach out to Amanda, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I invite people to, when they're facilitating an experience, a retreat, whatever it might be, to sort of take on the lens of I mean, I seek inspiration from nature and also from indigenous practices and originary wisdom. It's something that is a big informer of how I see the world. With the communities I've had the real privilege of connecting with. And I invite people to sort of put on that hat of like, what does the origin really look like of these transformational journeys? The origin is people don't do anything alone. These experiences are not meant to be done in isolation. Healing is relational, and it takes a tribe, it takes a community, a village to support somebody's journey. And we live in a society where we need to kind of do this ourselves. We may not even tell our friends or family that we're doing something like this. We go off in the woods for a weekend. We come back and that's it. Nobody needs to know. So as facilitators, we put on that hat of being one of the people in the tribe that supports that person's journey. And the other people can be a coach like myself or a friend. How do we support the friends and family to support that person's welcome home aspect? Or it could be a breathwork facilitator that is in the network of that facilitator, of that space holder, or a meditation teacher, or a specific set of books, or group sharing circles. Whatever it might be, it's about enabling that person to be held in a group container of different specialties. Mm-hmm. So it's more of just a mindset shift on that person's responsibility in their entire journey arc, rather than just a single, I am here to offer everything for you, right? Mm-hmm. I'm here to help you, and then you're good to go after.
Right. Going back to the idea of like a magic pill.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be a one cure that can fix everything. It's like different tools, different elements that can support them on the journey.
Yeah.
And I feel it's such a beautiful time as well, because people are opening to being supported more and more. Mm-hmm. And we are stepping away from this individualism, I feel. And as collective, people are more opening to the concept of community and exchanging skills in a more tribal way, in terms of having psychological support, having coaching, having therapies and different kind of healing practices, as opposed to 20th century when everybody was just about working and industry and this kind of survival mode.
Yeah, and it's in a bit of a way it is exactly what you're trying to do, right? With Conscious CoCreators, you're bringing people together to connect with each other so that somebody who's going through a process is being supported, right? By multiple people. And I will say one thing about that integration circle that you mentioned, how the facilitator hosts something that happens right after. I like to call that not necessarily integration, but more of a landing or a transition phase. It is very, very important part of somebody's journey, of course, to kind of come back to the integration. I feel starts once that person has left the container that's been built in that experience. Because we're not in life yet to be able to understand and to receive inputs and react to it.
And I feel like a lot of people at that stage are kind of left alone. So the integration process is kind of on them. Yeah. And then they sort of fall into the patterns of the past, or they're kind of lost and feeling like they don't have any grounding, where everything is shifted. So it's like, how do they get back to where they were? And it's impossible, because that place where they were doesn't exist anymore. So it's like they have to find a new space and integration from this place where they don't have the guidance can lead people to be lost. And I feel that bringing more awareness to the fact that integration is actually needed, I feel is important. And it's great what you're doing, so thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm curious to know about, because we've spoken a lot about altered states of consciousness, and I want to know, like, what do you feel is the altered state? Like, is it something that's always here that we kind of tap into, or do we sort of go somewhere or experience something? Because when you're there, it feels here, but now we're here, we feel like we're in a room and we're in this body, 3D. So what is this altered state that we experience?
Yeah, I'd love to say I have the perfect answer to this. Like I had sort of mentioned before, we don't need to do anything profoundly different to achieve that real connection that we're actually seeking. Somebody who wants to experience unconditional love, yes, they can have an MDMA-assisted therapy session where they open their hearts and they experience unconditional love because the substance supports them into opening their heart and to connecting with something more deeper about themselves. But we can experience unconditional love by observing a child walk down the street holding the hand of her parent and observing the butterfly that passes by, and we see the child and the butterfly having a moment, and we just see how beautiful is life just by existing. So these substances or these altered states experiences are actually just vehicles for us to be able to experience our own state of being in a more conscious way. So we can be in this reality with so much more awareness of what already exists that is absolutely wonderful and beautiful and special. An altered state is just a nice catchphrase for being deeper with oneself in this space.
Yeah, I feel the way I see it is that throughout our life, we kind of we go through experiences and then we have like these blockages, and it's almost like we have glasses that get fogged up. And then by the end, what we think is like normal is just like us trying to see through these like clogged up glasses, and we don't see reality for what it is. And if we see the child walking, we'll just ignore it because it's not even part of the problems that we're thinking about.
Yeah.
So we're going through life living in our problems, in our mind. And then the altered state is actually just like wiping the lens clean and actually seeing the experience for what it is and living life. And I feel that when we talk about things like you mentioned MDMA there and a few other things, when somebody has these like beautiful experiences, it's just kind of giving yourself that permission to fully experiencing that in the body, because of all of the stories that we create in the mind that sort of blocks that experience from coming through. So when we have these altered states, they will happen in our body. It's like we can't have an altered state outside of our body, so we experience it here, and then when it's gone, it's like our memory of tapping into it disappears as well. But we can always return.
Yeah, I love how you talk about it as being a permission. So we are giving ourselves permission to actually experience what we already have access to.
Yeah.
It's just an unlocking of it. And my hope is that integration is a way to extend your permission. It's like a here's your permission slip to actually experience that in your life now. And not just keep it as a story or an anecdote of life or something you can tell your friends, oh, I had this amazing journey. It's like, no, I am living this amazing journey every single day because of that experience.
Yeah.
That's the real love and joy that I think, the transformation that we're looking for.
I think if everything is an extension of a vibration, then our state of consciousness is also a vibration that has a certain frequency. And then this frequency, depending on what we ingest and what we put into our mind and what we give away from the body, is how we vibrate. It's the level of the frequency, which at the end, it is the quality of the presence.
Yeah.
And then all the modalities, be it psychedelics or yoga or breath work or Qigong, Tai Chi, all the energy work, Reiki, all of these energy-sensitive practices, they help us to raise the frequency towards the higher frequency, which is peace, love, harmony, empathy, so that we can be here and now, really present, as you say, with the lenses wiped out and really being in this loving presence, kindness to each around us. But for some of us, we call it healing processes, because we are healing from this mental clutter in order to become present. And at the end of the day, this is the only thing that matters. So I do believe that the integration that you introduce is also this means to arriving to these higher frequencies and being present with them. But in order to really stay long-term present with the positive vibrations, what we call good vibes, we also have to be able to stay present with not so positive vibrations like sadness, brokenness, grief, loss, self-doubt, all of these things. And this is what we call a bad trip. So I would love to dive into this bad trip topic for a moment before we will be wrapping up. What is your take on that? Because a lot of people are stopping from going into psychedelic journeys because of the famous bad trip, which is something that we need to look into, but we look away from in our regular life. How do you integrate these experiences?
Yeah. Oh, bad trips. I don't like calling them bad trips. I call them challenging experiences because bad attributes something good and bad doesn't actually have the correct... it already automatically implies that something is wrong that would have happened. Of course, there are experiences people have that put themselves in actual danger and risk of life. That is a dangerous experience. But the bad trip aspect, for me, if we zoom out, why are people fearful of this? Because they're fearful of experiencing this in their life as soon as they come out of presence and into their state of that vibration of fear, of anger, of sadness, right? What do we do with that information, with these inputs? This is where people don't know how to navigate that experience in their regular reality, let alone in an amplified state, right? Psychedelics, as Stan Grof calls it non-specific amplifiers. So you're going to amplify an existing process that is already within your psyche. So if you're entering into an experience that might, with already this vibration of a lot of fear around what could happen, maybe you're going to experience reflections of that within your journey itself. That's a possibility. Of course, this is highly, I'm simplifying because group dynamics play a big part into challenging experiences, the facilitator and their own ethical compass, right? There are absolutely external things that can be happening, right? Experiences of assault or any of these things that have actually do happen while people are in a suggestible state. So this concept of having a bad trip or a challenging experience, it actually highlights how important it is to have integration, and for integration to also include the language and vocabulary of working with the shadow, of working with those aspects of ourselves that are not just love and light. My spiritual friend circle and these communities that many of us maybe are a part of that work with these psychedelic states, a lot of them are just living in love and light, heal, peace and love. And that's a form of bypass of actually those shadow aspects of self that are very important to somebody's journey and that should be allowed to be unfolded and integrated so that it no longer is separated from and considered a lower aspect of self. We bring these in harmony so that when the sadness is expressed, the anger is expressed, it neutralizes the body. So an integration of that, that can take so many different forms, but for many people, it's actually just the permission to experience the shadow of self. It's just permission to allow that to come up. Maybe it came up during the journey and it was because your own conscious mind says, oh no, I shouldn't be feeling that right now. I don't want to be feeling sad. I don't want to cry my eyes out for hours and hours. And then they block it. And then afterwards they say that was a really bad trip because all they did was feel this tremendous amount of sadness and they couldn't get out of it. Maybe it's because you needed to experience that and feel that. So the integration is bridging it and actually giving permission and space and container for that sadness to be expressed in a healthy way. Yeah.
That's a lot of very valuable insights.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you have one takeaway message that you'd like to share from your heart.
yeah, I mean, I've shared a lot of things, you know, a lot of considerations, a lot of caution, a lot of, you know, ideas, all these things. I will just say that, look, we're all humans in progress. We're all trying to figure things out. Nobody knows everything and anything anyway. And that whether or not people choose to engage with these experiences, know that they're doing everything exactly right and that there is no right or wrong. I really believe that. The only thing is just to have a curiosity of where that can take you and an openness to that journey, that life journey. Yeah, that's what I would offer.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So for anyone who's watching, if you would like to get in touch with Amanda, we're going to list all the links in the description of this video.
Yes, we will. And see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.